Well, here we are on day 5 of our daily reflections, and we're looking at the prophetic faith that trusts beyond sight. And we're going to be looking at 2 Corinthians 5:7, where it says, "For we walk by faith and not by sight." And this powerful verse from 2 Corinthians 5:7 encapsulates the essence of what it means to live a life led by faith in God, rather than by what we can see or understand. And the Apostle Paul, who penned these words, encourages believers to live not according to what is immediately visible or tangible, but to trust in the unseen reality of God's work and promises. And this call to walk by faith moves beyond the merely believing what we've experienced before, and it's a prophetic, forward-looking faith that trusts God's plan, even when it's unclear. So the question is old faith versus prophetic faith? See, old faith often leans on what we have already seen God do. It is built upon the personal experiences, testimonies, and observable outcomes. While this kind of faith is foundational and important, prophetic faith goes deeper. Prophetic faith steps into the unknown, where the evidence of God's work is not yet visible. It is forward-looking, filled with expectation that God is working behind the scenes, even when our physical senses and logical reasoning cannot confirm it. So in the Christian life, there are moments when God calls us to move beyond the comfort of our own faith. The faith that relies on past experiences, and into a realm of trust where we no longer need to see in order to believe. And prophetic faith requires trusting God's promises and walking forward in obedience, even when the way ahead is hidden or the outcome is unclear. So, trusting beyond what we see is walking by faith, not by sight. It means choosing to trust God's character and His promises above our circumstances. In times of uncertainty, it's natural to seek a reassurance through visible signs, clear answers, and immediate results. Yet prophetic faith challenges us to surrender the need for control and certainty, and instead to trust in God's direction, even when we can't fully understand the path He's laid out before us. So let's consider how Abraham responded when God called him to leave his homeland for a place that he had never seen. Hebrews 11:8. Abraham's faith wasn't rooted in knowing every detail of his journey, but in trusting the one who has called him. His obedience to God did not rely on sight or knowledge of the destination, but was driven by faith in God's faithfulness. So likewise, prophetic faith demands that we follow God's call, not because we know the end result, but because we trust in His goodness and His ability to guide us. So what's the challenge of prophetic faith? Well, walking by faith, especially in the prophetic sense, is not always easy. It requires letting go of the need to have all the answers and choosing to trust God, even when our circumstances don't align with our expectations. It can feel risky to step into a place of faith where we cannot see the outcome or predict how God will work. Yet, this is precisely the type of faith that God calls us into as we mature in our spiritual walk. So in the story of the Israelites' journey through the wilderness, they were asked to trust God for daily provision. Exodus 16:4-5. There was no certainty about where the food would come from each day, but God provided manna from heaven, and their faith had to be in that God who promised to sustain them, even though they couldn't see the future provision. And the same principle really applies to our walk with God today. We may not always see the immediate fulfillment of these promises, but faith compels us to trust that He is faithful to provide in every season. So prophetic faith requires surrendering our desire for control and our need for immediate answers. It pushes us to lean on God's wisdom rather than our own understanding. Proverbs 3:5-6. And it asks us to step into the unknown, not because we know exactly what will happen, but because we trust the one who does. So by walking in obedience without the full picture is when God calls us to walk by faith and not by sight. He invites us into a journey of obedience where the full plan may not be visible to us. And sometimes God reveals only the next step, asking us to trust him with the rest. And this can be really uncomfortable because it challenges our desire for certainty and clarity. However, it also deepens our relationship with God. And as we learn to rely on him rather than on our own understanding. So faith that trusts beyond sight is essential in a prophetic journey. Whether we are waiting on the promises from God, navigating difficult circumstances, or stepping into a new calling, we are often required to trust him without seeing the full picture. And this type of faith is not passive but active, continually moving forward in obedience to God's voice, even when the path ahead seems unclear. So it's in these moments that we grow the most spiritually. Our dependency on God increases as we trust him to guide our steps. And our faith strengthens as we see his faithfulness unfold over time. And often in ways we never really expected, prophetic faith calls us to act based on God's promises, even when our natural eyes see nothing. So just a reflection for today, trusting God without seeing the full picture. Is there areas in your life where God is asking you to trust him without having all the answers? And perhaps it's a situation where the future seems uncertain, or you feel called to step out in faith, but you're unsure about the outcome. Maybe it's a promise you've been holding on to, but you can't yet see how it will come to pass. So think about how you can walk in obedience even when the full plan isn't visible. What does it look like to move forward in faith, trusting that God is working behind the scenes, even when you can't see it? And in these moments, it is essential to remind yourself of God's past faithfulness. Although prophetic faith asks us to trust in God in new ways, and reflecting on how he has worked in our lives before, and he can strengthen and your confidence in the future plans. So Lord, increase our faith that we can walk boldly in your promises even when we can't see the full plan. Help us to trust in your faithfulness, not in what our eyes see or what we can understand. And teach us to walk it by faith, knowing that you are guiding every step of our journeys. And give us the courage to move forward in obedience even when the outcome is unclear. And as we surrender our need for control and trust you and we trust you with the unseen future. Amen. So final thought, prophetic faith challenges us to go beyond what we can see and to trust God with the unknown. And it calls us to take steps of obedience knowing that God is faithful, even when we don't have all the answers. As we learn to walk by faith and not by sight, we grow deeper in the relationship with him and experience the fullness of his plans in ways that go beyond our expectations. And we trust that God is working even when the outcome isn't visible.